Hey guys, welcome to this episode of the podcast. I have a special celebrity guest today. I'm going to let you introduce yourself. So, yeah, just a brief introduction for the audience.
Well, everyone, my name's Karl Bainbridge. I am the curator, editor, director, writer, pretty much busybody of the YouTube channel It's Not Cage Fighting. You can find us at youtube.com/, It's Not Cage Fighting. We produce MMA related content, fighter breakdowns. We've also got a few entertainment based videos, and we're always looking to try and grow and mature the channel over the coming years.
Yeah, one point I want to bring up to my audience. His channel is one of the best first channels I go to before any fights for an analysis of fighters and an analysis of what the fight's going to be. I even saw your latest podcast episode about the UFC 249 fight card.
It's very difficult to know
Yeah.
what's going to be happening with UFC 249. It's a very divisive subject. I think there's a lot of people who like the idea of Dana White moving forward, trying to get some fights on the board, and there are other people thinking about health and safety and some of the ethics that go behind holding a show basically against the law.
Yeah, it really did shock me because I know it is the fifth time that Khabib and Ferguson's fight was postponed, but you kind of gotta Khabib can't leave Russia at the moment, so it does make me kind of sad. But I know they did place another fighter in there, Gajente, I believe, and I am really excited for that fight. I truly do believe Ferguson does have this one.
I think it is very disappointing to lose Tony and Khabib. I mean, every hardcore fan wants to see that fight because we know how good both guys are.
Yeah.
But if you had to pick a suitable replacement for either fighter, I think Justin Gaethje would be on the top of a lot of people's lists because this guy is just gung-ho, forward pressure all the time, and he started to iron out a lot of those flaws in his striking defense. And we've seen this with the wins over James Vick, Edson Barboza, Cowboy. He has grown from being just a sort of reckless brawler, and he is now a legitimate top 5 fighter. And I think if this fight goes late on, we get to the third and fourth rounds, I think Tony's still got it in him that he could put Justin away. But Justin's going to cause a lot of problems in those early rounds.
Yeah, it's definitely, for me, I believe it's something that can't really be judged pre. It's going to be really even, especially considering the stand-up, like, pure kickboxing style that both fighters have proficiency in. Whereas it's not so polarizing with Khabib and Ferguson, where Ferguson does a lot of stand-up martial arts like Muay Thai. He even practices Wing Chun, as opposed to Khabib, who's the polar opposite, where he's a sambo wrestler. And it's not that polarizing where we can just judge based off of that, where now I truly think that it's a really even matchup. So for me, I don't think that I can decide who would win, other than the fact that that Ferguson is just a top guy, and Dana White wouldn't make him lose, if anything, in terms of underhand bets. But in terms of skill, these guys know similar martial arts, and they're similar style fighters in a sense. And it would be hard for me to just pick one in terms of skill.
I think Ferguson has more of an advantage when he goes to the ground than Gaethje. I mean, Gaethje does have the wrestling background, but I think I've only seen him like try and go for one takedown during his career. It's something for him to fall back on rather than his bread and butter. Whereas we've seen with Tony before. I mean, Tony has one of the most dangerous stance chokes in this sport. And there was a lot of people thinking that one of the appeals of the Tony versus Khabib fight, yeah, Tony does have the striking advantage, but Tony is so good off his back. Could Khabib be able to put that sort of ground and pound game that he specializes in on somebody who's always going to be throwing his legs up and always going to be going for any kind of choke he can?
Yeah, I always, considering the kind of skill and training Khabib had before, like, especially, like, his specific city had 2,000 people in it, and I believe, and they had, 20 people from there have Olympic medals in wrestling. So I have no doubt that, it's going to be tough for him. But, if Ferguson does get to the ground, he's going to give Khabib a good fight. But if he does get to the ground, Khabib's definitely going to have the underhand or like top hand in that fight.
Yeah.
But in this case, they both have wrestling, like they both have ground-based skill at a certain level, because we haven't seen, like, from what we've seen on the ground, they both have same skill in this new card, and stand-up wise as well, they both have similar skills in terms of striking. So
As I
yeah,
said before, I think that given what the UFC have had to work with, I think Tony versus Gaethje is probably one of the best fights that they can do.
yeah. So yeah, along that line, I just wanted to ask, who do you think the top guy in the UFC is right now?
It depends on what we're talking about when it comes to the top guy. Are we talking from a media perspective? Are we talking from their actual qualities as a fighter?
In terms of qualities of a fighter, um, who would you think is the best that the sport has to offer, in your opinion?
Well, I think at this moment in time, I mean, I don't think you can ignore Khabib. I mean, we've got 28-0. I mean, he's unbeaten throughout his career, and there have been very few times where I felt he looked really vulnerable. I mean, Michael Johnson came out guns blazing and did catch him with some really good shots. Dustin caught him in the guillotine at 242. But on the whole, it's been dominance for him. I think he's only lost one round throughout his career. And you might argue, yeah, some of those 28 fights, some of them were against weaker opponents. But to maintain that level of quality throughout a career, I don't think it'd be overlooked.
Yeah, same thing for me, because I remember it was the Barboza fight where I know Barboza's a really good kicker, um, but this guy's kick, I remember at one point he gave Khabib a roundhouse kick straight to the side of the head, which not only should have taken the fighter, like, KO'd them, should have sent them to the hospital for a while. But when Barboza gave Khabib that kick, Barboza went backwards. It affected Barboza more than it did Khabib. So I just saw a guy with brute strength. And that too, during the Conor versus Khabib fight, that Fulcrum choke, I haven't seen that many Fulcrum chokes in takedowns. They're usually rear naked chokes, but to actually get a Fulcrum choke that tight and actually be able to put it in.
I could maybe make the argument and say that one of the issues I've had with Conor a couple of times is when Conor does face sort of adversity, especially when it comes to submissions, he does sometimes look for an easier way out. I think somebody with a lot more heart might have tried to hold on for a bit longer. Because I don't think that Fulcrum choke was as tough as what it maybe was. I think Conor was looking for a way out. But that's my controversial statement of the day. So
Yeah, I did, like, it wasn't into a full grip, but that being said, a fulcrum does hurt a lot, because
it
not only
does.
does it affect the neck at the same time because you're pushing in the jaw, but
I
it
mean,
can unhinge
a
the
twister
nerves
is
at the back.
basically a Fulcrum choke.
Yeah, yeah,
So yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. It would absolutely kill me if I ever got put in one.
yeah. Same here. Like, that's one of the things that I do worry about. Getting in a choke like that from a professional wrestler that has that kind of grip strength would kill most people. So yeah, I just want to bring our discussion into the theme of the podcast. So bringing wanting to bring MMA as a quality sport that anyone can do, and trying to remove stigma to it. So
Yeah.
just to get your some information about how it's related to you, how you got into it, I wanted to ask, what's your connection to MMA, and why does it interest you out of all sports out there?
Well, my interest in MMA, that started really through word of mouth. I mean, I've always been a big follower of sport. Obviously, I love football, soccer to the Americans. Motor racing was also a big thing for me. And I'd always had a good, I wouldn't say a love of combat sports, but my uncle used to run a boxing gym. So during the 90s, we were watching all the great British fighters. So it was like Nigel Benn, Chris Eubank, Steve Collins, etc. And then, of course, the Conor McGregor hype started. Everyone was talking about this Irish guy who was knocking everyone out, and he was causing all these jokes and all this chaos at the press conferences. So I think it was UFC 196 comes along. And I know that Conor's going to be fighting this guy, Nate Diaz. So I think, you know what? I'm just going to check out this fight and see what happens. And then it was Misha Tate choking out Holly Holm in the final minute of the final round. And just the sort of twists and turns that went with that fight. And I thought to myself, God, this is fantastic. I need to watch the next one. And then I read up on the guy who's going to be headlining the next card, John Jones, and apparently he's really good. So I tune in for that one, and the rest is history. Haven't missed a pay-per-view since.
Yeah, that's actually something similar that I went through as well. Grew up watching all these um all these martial art films growing up, especially like all those cheesy Asian ones. Got a really nice interest into it, and then it was right around the same time where I watched the Diaz versus McGregor fight, and I got really in touch with the title cards there, and from then I just binged watched all of the fights to see what kind of stuff is out there. So yeah, it's one of the reasons why I got interested into it as well.
And that's why I've never had a massive issue with the sort of super draw fighters. I think there's a lot of hardcore fans that sort of maybe look a bit down on them because you appeal to the casual fan. But the way I look at it is a good percentage of those casual fans will stick around to watch a lesser pay-per-view. So you do need the Connors, the Rondas, the Brocks, the GSPs of the world to attract the everyday fans in, because those are the guys who are going to be watching like the Contender Series or like a fight night over in the Philippines in 2-3 years time.
Yeah, but with like these top guys, especially with the WWE, one of the reasons why most people do watch something like WWE is because of that level of trash talking that goes on. Everyone from the age of 4 to like old people watch WWE just because of that trash talking. But in terms of like skill, yeah, I had a wrestling friend on my channel, and I do agree there's a lot of skill and athleticism that goes into it, but it doesn't compare to the guys that go into UFC or Bellator or in MMA in general, where these guys have to learn. Like a lot of these guys know 3 or 4 martial arts. Like many of them know a lot more, and just the skill and strategy it takes to get into it. So why do you? So with that, I know that trash talking is one of the biggest things, but why do you think there's just a negative? That's just for UFC. Why do you think there's such a negative stigma for MMA?
I think the stigma, I think a lot of it is visual. I think that people see the cage and they think it's a lot more brutal than what it maybe is. And I think as well, a lot of the marketing around mixed martial arts, especially in the early 90s, sort of prided itself on how brutal and how violent it was. And people go off first impressions a lot of the time. So when you have people like the John McCains of the world trying to ban the sport and say how violent and how aggressive it is, those sort of images stick in people's minds. Plus, as well, I think there's, especially in this country, especially in the UK, we sort of grew up with boxing a lot of the time. And even though boxing is a bit violent and a bit brutal, there's a lot of history around it. Like it's sort of like 1700s Queensberry rules. It's sort of seen as the gentleman's combat sport, whereas MMA is maybe a bit more working class. Because I mean, I believe the Gracies I think they were fishermen in Brazil, which is a
Yeah,
very sort of working class sort of origin of the sport compared to, say, a boxing.
yeah. I have a special respect for the Gracies in the sense where they brought everyone was thinking of the Eastern martial arts as the top, like everyone was wanting to do karate with the Karate Kid or boxing, but no one was really trying to explore the other martial arts that are really effective. Like for example, if I was to take a Muay Thai guy, Muay Thai is known like either you think that Muay Thai's back then people either would have thought that oh Muay Thai is deadly or Muay Thai is they don't even know what Muay Thai is. Or same thing with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Everyone knew about the Japanese version or like they probably wouldn't, but like just bringing it into a light where there's so many others out there that are really effective. And them, I think that Dana even called them the godfathers of modern UFC. I think it's I have a special respect for the Gracies for what they did, and I think because of them, a lot more gyms are doing jujitsu classes. A lot more people are interested in it.
Certainly agree. I think that, and that's what made the first UFC so amazing to watch. I suggested anybody who does have Fight Pass checks out that first competition because you see these. I mean, look at Ken Shamrock. Ken Shamrock, just like 240 pounds, jacked with every kind of steroid going, and you're just thinking, there's no way this guy's going to lose. And then you've got Hoist Gracie in his pajamas, just comes in, chokes him out in 2 minutes.
Yeah, like they just showed the everyone thought that karate at that point was the most effective martial art at that point, but in turn, like just because of all the rules in it, like it's effective against people who don't know what they're doing.
Yes.
But it really did show that, like, yeah, it does have a lot of flaws, it does have a lot of weaknesses, and people have to know multiple to be able to fight in various situations.
And I think jiu-jitsu's maybe going through that same phase right now because you'd argue, I think about 90% of the UFC roster have a brown belt or a black belt in jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
And I don't think we're seeing the pure submission experts having as much success as they maybe used to. I mean, obviously, yeah, you've got like a Damian Maia who's like still going strong in the top 10, but he's nearing the end of his career. And I think those sort of days where you can just purely get by from being great on the ground is sort of coming to an end.
Yeah, it definitely is just due to the sheer popularity, but it is something that it is a skill that one should have because I know GSP was. I remember I don't know what interview GSP was saying this in, but with his just his karate background, he was talking about how he had a lot of issues initially and where he had to learn ground-based
Yes.
defense because and even Joe Rogan said on his podcast as well, like whenever someone when he was fighting the Muay Thai guys and as a Taekwondo guy originally, he'd be like, "Why are you kicking my shin?" So just having that versatility of being able to go on all fronts, I think is definitely more beneficial. And then having that, and if you both know the same martial art, essentially both know Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, you're just trying to see who has the better skill in it at this point, which is a fair competition.
I mean, how many times have we seen these great grapplers, these great wrestlers, too scared to go with each other to the ground and then just deciding to have a kickboxing match? I mean, we saw that with Colby and Usman.
Yeah.
Everyone thought there's no way that fight's going to be standing up. They're both going to try and take each other down. And then we got a 5-round brawl. And I have to admit, I hold my hands up. I didn't think that was going to be a great fight, and it completely exceeded my expectation.
Yeah, and just having that one and just having like a versatility of being able to do something that you don't have definitely makes a fight interesting. That's actually one of the things that I felt bad about the last fight against Adesanya and Yomero, where these guys are both good at kickboxing, and a lot of people were expecting a round or two of brawling, but it was just so bland. Like the female title card was a lot more fun in that fight. Obviously, health consequences, but like when the referee has to come in and tell you, like, dude, fight the other guy.
Yeah.
Don't just stand here and like do jump rope around the cage. It
Well,
it really does not.
I always hold Adesanya versus Romero as a good example of how styles make fights, because Adesanya's skill set is always reliant on counter striking. He needs to have somebody coming forward so that he can throw the quick punches, get out before he gets caught. And that's what made the Kelvin Gastelum fight before then so good, because Kelvin was willing to like wade through the punches to try and get on the inside and make it difficult for Adesanya. Yet Romero is so wary about his cardio that he's not going to be willing to go first. And that's what we basically had. We had a stalemate because both were wanting to play to their advantage, and the other wasn't giving them the bait.
Yeah, and I think that's another issue with Yomiro's size as well. The guy is huge for his weight, a lot of muscle. So if he counters, he definitely will cause a lot more damage than Adesanya would. But like the thing is, he is super heavy. Like he just can't. A buff guy like that can't move as easily. So like initially, I was thinking, yeah, like this. I didn't have high hopes to start off with for that fight in the first place, but I was expecting some more versatility where these guys would pick up something else
Yeah.
to learn just for the fight. But like even when Dana White was like, I'm disappointed by the fight. Like it wasn't the best move out there by the UFC. So yeah. Another question I wanted to ask was like, unlike soccer or basketball, where like injuries do happen, but they're mostly accidental, MMA and other combat sports are basically the main objective is to injure the other person. How do you think we can protect the athletes from getting a lot of issues like Muhammad Ali? We knew with the Parkinson's, and like by the time he got into the his last fight, he was already slurring his words and everything, couldn't touch his nose. How can we protect these guys from
Well,
situations like that, but like not stop the sport from being entertaining?
I've had this argument with a couple of my friends. We basically, from the area I have, we do have a lot of people who are more pro boxing than they are mixed martial arts. Um, I think head injuries are sadly going to be a prominent part of this of both sports for years to come. And I don't think I would personally like to see that less violent sparring. I think that could be a good work around it because I know there's some training camps, especially like Nova União down in Brazil. They go very aggressive in the training camps. And I know that Gray Maynard, his training camp, they were quite aggressive as well. And that arguably played a part in Gray's career sort of going on a steeper decline as a result. But getting back to the point about MMA and boxing, I think with boxing, most of the fighting around boxing is around trying to strike the head and trying to obviously cause more damage in that sort of area. And more than anything, if a fighter goes down in boxing, the first instinct is get back up and let's keep this fight going. So you've got the 10 count, you've got the referee trying to do what they can to keep it going. Whereas with MMA, you're encouraging working the body, you're encouraging going for submission attempts. And if a fighter does go down, then the referee senses, hey, they're not going to defend themselves. He jumps in straight away.
Yeah,
I think there's more short-term damage in MMA, but in terms of long-term damage, in terms of blows to the head, I think boxing is much worse because there are a lot of issues with CTE, as you mentioned before, when it comes to boxing. And maybe because MMA is a younger sport, we're not seeing that as much. I mean, like obviously Gary Goodridge is probably the most prominent example, but it's not as taboo in MMA as it is in boxing. And I think you can maybe see that with some of the corners as well, that the corners will allow a fight to go on longer because they don't recognize the long-term damage in the way that boxing coaches might.
For me, I would like as much as yeah, like if you do something like Muay Thai or something and it is a striking fight, blows to the head are uninevitable. But same thing in boxing. But one thing I can definitely say is, or one thing I've learned from like Ali's fight, his last one, which really did hit me close in my heart, is they should do a medical test before every fight, and if they
Yes.
see any sense of deterioration, like no matter what they say, no matter what, like how much money is there, like they should stop it because at the end of the day, these fighters are at the mercy of the referee. Like God forbid they get some guy like Mario Yamasaki, like the fighter will go down, or if it was anything like the Bibsing versus GSP fight where Bibsing, the guy's an animal, the guy did not tap, took the choke out like a man. But like the blood loss to the brain, like it could have caused serious damage. So if they don't have the mental capacity as before it, or they any signs of deterioration, I definitely think that it should be stopped. The fight should be canceled.
And that's something that Joe Rogan's made a point out in his podcast as well. he's very vocal in saying, hey, if you are one of those fighters who is maybe on the decline or maybe doesn't think that they'll ever reach the top, get out as quickly as you can, protect your health. Obviously, he said that with Brendan Schaub, and him and Schaub are quite close friends. And
Yeah,
he basically talked him into retirement. He said, look, you're a good fighter, but you're probably not going to get any better. So just cut your losses and get out the sport while you still can. So and Brendan took that on board, and obviously he's got himself a new career, and his health seems relatively in check. So
yeah. Well, Scob, he stopped hurting himself in MMA, and now is hurting his audience with his stand-up. But it's still a
I
lot better.
respect
Yeah,
I respect the guy's work ethic. I'm
yeah,
not the biggest fan of him as a stand-up comedian, but the guy, considering what he's had to work with, has done very well for himself.
yeah,
But no, I take the same approach. I think that I would rather have a fighter retire too early than retire too late.
yeah. Like if Ali retired one or two fights too late, like it was said that he took almost 200,000 blows to the head, and even if it's light taps, I can't even imagine 200,000
Well, I think the
smacks to the
issue as
head.
well, and I think that's maybe a big difference between MMA and boxing as well, is that with boxing, when you reach that sort of higher echelons of the sport, the amount of money is just so much that a fighter will say, you know what, I'll be willing to sacrifice it. I'll take one more fight just to earn that extra paycheck. And I think maybe we criticize places like the UFC for not paying its fighters enough. But maybe as a result of that, we're getting people who are more willing to walk away from the sport when things do get rough.
Yeah, but something like, let's say you have someone like Ray Borg, the guy, talented fighter, but like the guy's really poor, and especially with his son's surgery and medical issues.
Hmm.
He definitely, even if his health was deteriorating, he would have taken extra fights, and
Yes.
it was generous of Scott to actually. I think Scott, one of the reasons why he paid for the medical expenses was because he took Rogan's words to heart and didn't want any health damage.
Yes. Yes.
But yeah, I know you are a big fan of MMA and you have been watching UFC quite regularly. So from what you've seen there, what martial arts do you think were the most effective combination or like single best martial art for someone to learn?
I would personally say when it comes to actually being successful in MMA, you've got to look at a wrestling background. Because with wrestling, you can control exactly where the fight goes. If you want to keep it standing, you've got the takedown defense. And if you do want to take it to the ground, maybe try and implement a ground and pound game or a submission based game, again, you can put yourself in that position. I think jiu-jitsu is very effective if you want to try and finish a fight. But I think what we're seeing with a lot of jiu-jitsu specialists right now is that they struggle to actually get a fight to the ground. They're fantastic when you can actually get into that position, but it's becoming increasingly harder for those jiu-jitsu experts to do so. So I personally favor wrestling, and it might not be the most enjoyable to watch. There are a lot of people who are lay and prey experts, but it is effective. So I would certainly favour wrestling as a base, and then try and add on the submission game and the striking game.
Yeah, I like with wrestling as well. I think it's a lot more accessible because every high school has a wrestling team. If you want to join, not every place has a karate or jujitsu or kickboxing place to actually go in and learn. But
Well,
almost, yeah,
that's always been the big issue when it comes to the British fighters, because we don't really have that sort of wrestling foundation in the way that the Americans do.
yeah,
And if you look at a lot of the top British fighters, they are fantastic strikers. I mean, our Muay Thai scene especially is very, very good. But you take a British fighter to the ground, they're hopeless.
yeah. A lot of I think it's more of an American thing in their
Yes.
emphasis on sports overall. because doesn't matter how smart you are, like you can be Elon Musk and you'll only get half your tuition paid for, but like, oh my God, this guy can toss a ball or this guy can wrestle. They're getting a full ride no matter how dumb they are. So I think sports does play on a huge emphasis in America. And MMA, I think one big sport that I think everyone should be able to take up because people do have a lot of pent up rage that if they were to take out on a punching bag, it would probably help them a lot in their life, day to day life.
And there's always been this argument as well, and we've seen this with because if you look at a lot of the top fighters, whether it's boxing or MMA, etc., a lot of them come from quite difficult backgrounds. And basically, what training a combat sport will do is it not only gets them off the street and tries to channel their focus into something more productive, but also if you know what your fists or your legs can do to somebody, you become less inclined to lash out.
It's another thing is like if you ever walked into an MMA gym, like some of the most peaceful people you ever seen,
Yes.
and like they show it wrong in a lot of movies. I think it was a Michael J. White movie where they were like, yeah, no, the guy's sparring and he's talking trash to everyone, and then in Warriors with Tom Hardy as well, like the guy in the ring's always talking trash, but like that never happens in an MMA gym because everyone had their fair share of defeat, and a guy who got in an MMA gym, you always know that there's going to be someone better than you. And if you talk crap to someone, there's always going to be a guy who can kick the shit out of you if he tries. So it puts a
There,
muzzle on a lot of people.
there is a little bit of alpha bravado, but I think that comes with the nature of the sport. You need to have a lot of self-confidence to obviously try and be successful and make it to like the top echelons of the sport. But I do agree with you. I think that there's a lot of self-respect, and I think because I think a lot of fighters recognize that you need to have those struggles, you need to have that adversity to become a stronger fighter by the end of it. So if somebody does catch you in a submission, your instinct shouldn't be, oh God, I got caught in a submission, I feel like scum now. No, it should be, well, I made that mistake and now I'm going to learn how to get over it.
Yeah, and it's and the thing with UFC or like MMA in general is most martial arts when they teach you, they not only do they have the physical side, but they also have the meditational side, especially in Eastern martial arts, where when you start, you bow to your master, you learn how to respect someone, you do a lot, and when you do learn in a place in like if you were to learn from a Montessori in China, or if you were to learn in a dojo in uh, Kyoto or something, the first thing they would make you do is like do chores, learn to respect other people, learn to serve other people, and it's just the peace. They teach you how to be peaceful along with teaching you the violent side and basically showing you the consequences where being peaceful is just as important where as the actual physical side. And karate is basically the Japanese translation is open hand. So don't use your hand or weapons or violence when you words are enough.
I can tell you there's so many times in an MMA fight where I've seen some really good acts of sportsmanship,
Yeah.
yet I can only count it on a finger when it comes to something like boxing. So I do totally agree with you. I think there's a real respect side of it. I think karate especially is one of the best examples. I mean, Machida is one of the most respectful fighters after a fight. And I think a lot of that is down to the fact he came from a karate background.
Yeah, and I think like I said, not to trash the guy too much, he does deserve trashing. But Mario Yamasaki, at one point, the guy was like standing back, and so the opponent, I forgot which fight it was, but the opponent was like, "I already got him on the ground. He's already KO'd. What else do you want me to do?" And he's like, "Dude, I'm not hitting a guy that's already KO'd." Mario Yamasaki couldn't see that he was KO'd and was like, "Dude, why aren't you hitting him?" And the
That
fight was
reminds
forced.
me of, I think it was it Dan Miragliotta? I think he did
I
something similar with Jacobin Whiteman.
Yeah, it is. Um, but like that really did shock me where the level of sportsmanship that I see in MMA just because of the respect aspect where like the guy's already down, like I don't need to do follow up ground and pound on him, and I rarely see that from like Tyson's known to be sportsmanship. Like after the fight, like after the guys like get up, he'll go and talk to him. But like once the KO's, he'll destroy a guy in the ring while the match is still on. So I don't see that level of the sportsmanship in any other sport.
Totally
So,
agree.
yeah, so I have a small section in the end of my podcast where I ask a guest to if there's any other stuff that he would like to bring up. So I just wanted to ask, is there any thing else like that you want to add to our discussion today?
Well, we will be hopefully doing a UFC 249 preview show. We're going to be recording that on the Sunday, so it should hopefully be online either the Sunday evening or the Monday afternoon. Great thing over here is we've got a bank holiday coming up, so I've got a lot of time to work on it.
Yeah,
249, it's going to be a very strange show, and we
yeah,
still don't know exactly what's going to be happening. I expect the card to chop and change a couple of times. Um, there's a lot of ethical issues surrounding this card, but I think those people will put those to one side once we actually see the card taking place, because I think people are ready for sport again. Not
yeah,
just MMA, not just combat sports, but anything.
yeah. Everyone's pent up at home and needs some kind of entertainment.
I mean, trust
And
me, I've said that by the end of this pandemic, we're all going to be one of three things. We're either going to be fantastic gardeners, bodybuilders, or podcast hosts, because that's the only things that we can do at home right now.
yeah, and that's one of the reasons why my podcast I've been working on hard a lot more lately. If you look at all my previous content before the podcast, I was so busy with school, I didn't have proper research, I didn't have proper questions. It was so I went from talking about intermittent fasting to trashing Apple in a lot of episodes, and now like I actually got questions, interviews, I got my website running, and everything's going great. So this quarantine, I wouldn't say it's a blessing, but like it's a shitty situation. It's just making the best out of it. But
I,
hopefully they can give me something that won't make me lose my mind along with all the other stuff that's been going on.
I totally agree. I think that I've always been a big believer that if there's that old saying, if life gives you lemons, make lemonade, if I
Yeah,
can even say it. If life gives you lemons, make lemonade. And I think that's the situation which I think a lot of us have been in. I mean, we think, yeah, well, we can't work or we can't go to the shops. So let's try and take advantage of the situation we have. And I mean, I'm probably the most productive that I've been for a long time. I know a lot of my friends as well. They're trying to start up with their artwork, or they're posting more videos than what they maybe would have done on social media. It's trying to take advantage of a bad situation.
yeah, and I have to apologize for what's going on with your prime minister right now.
Yes, yes, it's very. I think it's maybe the wake up call that a lot of people needed. I think that some people were quite dismissive of some of the hazards, and then I think obviously Boris Johnson coming on, getting unwell, needing intensive care. I think a lot of people realised, darn, he is this healthy man, and he's now in hospital because of it. I think all indications are that he is recovering. Don't know how much longer he'll be in hospital, but fingers crossed for him. Whether you like him politically or not, you don't want to see bad things happen to anyone.
Yeah, like I definitely do understand how we would be for you guys because I'm Canadian and our prime minister's wife had it, so he had to go into isolation for a few weeks. He's still in isolation right now, but it's definitely affecting us all. So yeah, thank you for coming on to the podcast today. Uh,
You're very welcome.
yeah, your channel "It's Not Cage Fighting" is amazing. I recommend everyone to go watch it, and the information for it will be in this channel's description. So please do subscribe and follow my friend Karl.
Thank you very much.
All right.